Hopper and everybody, and seeing some friends from the great vast right-wing conspiracy here, working to promote the causes we all believe in. And the senator is absolutely right. There are a number of very basic issues, including free speech and fighting for that here in the state of Oklahoma. And nationally, national security, do we retreat or do we stay on offense and learn how to do it and get it right? Do we reduce taxes, simplify taxes, or raise them? Do we allow patients to have more control of health care, or do we have the government take a bigger role? Social Security, you understand that one. Do we allow younger people to have the opportunity to have their own personal accounts with proper safeguards, or do we have more of the same, which means less of the same, ultimately? And energy, do we do it, or do we have Washington try to do it? As I mentioned at the luncheon today, a previous president by the name of Jimmy Carter thought that taxes and controls were the way to solve the energy problem, which is why he got to build his library 4 years sooner than anticipated, one of the factors. And by the way, we should keep in mind, with all the talk about excess profits, which Senator Obama repeatedly brings up, is that, first of all, Starbucks makes profit margins far greater, so maybe we should have Washington control coffee. But the private sector knows how to do these things. And if you remove resources from those who are devoted and have the incentive to find this stuff, we will lose out. We've been here before. We've seen this movie before. So on a whole host of issues, we are at the proverbial crossroads. It's a cliche, but this time it has a ring of truth that it hasn't had since 1980. You see this government controlling electricity. And that's what would happen in an operating room with Hillary Care. So it is great to be here with people who know how to agitate. I find it's now fun to be an agitator. And the council is doing great work in bringing on the local level as well as on the national level, making positive things come to pass. And we should have learned from the other side, if you don't push your ideas, they ain't going to happen. And if you push them in ways that sometimes we cannot anticipate, good things will happen. And while right now it looks discouraging, we're not going to win on imagery against Senator Obama, but on substance we've got a shot at it, especially if the candidates, as Jim has done, believes it and is willing to fight for it. People will respect you, and you can turn these things around. And just the other day, talking about global warming, there have been several studies that are posing real red flags on sunspots, that activity of the sun has an enormous impact on weather. 11-year cycle. If that cycle doesn't pick up again in the next couple of years, why, we could have another mini ice age, the likes of which hadn't happened since 300 years ago when the Thames River used to freeze up. They'd have ice fairs on the ice there. Today, the only ice that goes in the Thames River is revelers throwing it from their drinks. But weather changes, and sadly, we humans have very little control on it. It's hubris to think otherwise, and potentially very costly if we actually believe it and do something like cap and trade, which the Europeans have tried since, 2005 in the energy industry. And industry in Europe has now raised a hue and cry with the European Union, the bureaucracy there, saying if you really tighten up on allowable emissions, we're going to have to move outside of Europe. You're going to, already electricity costs are up 5 to 10% because of the cap and trade. It's going to go up much more if they make it put real teeth into the thing. And now they're facing the prospect. These folks are going to move. They cannot afford the extra, extraneous, unnecessary costs.
Only 2 countries have actually reduced their emissions since they got embarked on the program and signed on to the ratifying the treaty.
And amazingly, our emissions growth, I guess, between 2000 and 2005 was less than the EU. And last year it actually went down a little bit. And another thing to keep in mind is that technology is the friend. You look at the East Coast. The East Coast of the U.S. now has more trees than it did 80, 100 years ago. If you look at those old Civil War pictures, farms, all clear-cut. That's what you had to do in those days. And today, thanks to technology, you go in New England, you walk in forests, you got to be careful you don't trip over these old stone walls of areas that where the trees have regrown, because you don't need the acreage today that you needed then to grow foodstuffs. So progress is good. But thank you for having us come by. Yeah.
Minor journalist question. What? Two sides of the same question. Senator Inhofe can chime in if he wishes. What's the greatest, most positive achievement as you look back at the Bush years? And on the flip side, what's your greatest disappointment that you hope the next Republican president can improve on? So two sides of the same coin.
Well, let me start with the disappointments. One is I'm disappointed of the de facto policy of the administration of having a weak dollar. The theory is that improves your trade balance, but whatever you gain temporarily on trade by letting the value of your currency go down, you more than pay for distortions in the rest of the economy. We see it in housing. The excess liquidity created in 2004 helped put the housing market on steroids. Now, the industry went berserk, but we all know in the court of law, the bartender is also held liable if the patron is drinking too much and the bartender keeps serving up the booze. The bartender, i.e. the Fed, bears some liability and responsibility. So that's a big one. And the Treasury Department bureaucracy has triumphed on that one, and we're paying the price for it now. Major distortions. Obviously on the spending side, the Senator can speak far more with horror stories than I can. We lost our way on that one. And on the positive side, which gets to one of the negatives, on the positive side, the President recognized after 9/11 that we had to fight this thing. And I guess where the disappointment comes in that after 9/11, especially when we recognized we had an insurrection in Iraq, we still tried to fight the thing on the cheap and did not make the call to the country to raise the resources and the manpower to meet the new obligations we faced around the world. And the continuous deployment of people. My wife and I have 5 daughters. They're in their 20s and 30s. They have a number of friends who are in the military and had assignments over there. What they saw over there is very different from what was reported here. And but the rotations begin to wear on a while. The morale is good. They want to do it, but we've got to realize the fact we had to scrape and scrounge to get the surge going, that's ridiculous. We should have the manpower necessary to meet these obligations and do it in a way where we don't put an extra strain on people who are already putting enough on the line. And that gets, I think, to the most fundamental failure of the administration